Hey everyone, welcome to the Chilling Hour, where the stories never let you sleep. My name is Lisa Warren, and I'm 28 years old. I'll never forget the summer I worked as a seasonal park ranger in the backwoods of Shenandoah National Park. I thought it would be the perfect escape, nature, solitude, and a little extra money, but what I experienced there changed the way I think about the woods forever. It all started during my first week. I was assigned to a remote section of the park known for its dense forests and winding trails, miles away from any visitor center. The other rangers warned me to always stay alert, but I didn't realize just how seriously I should take that advice. My shifts were long, usually from sunrise to well past sunset, and my only companion was the radio. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind you expect in the woods, but a thick, oppressive quiet that seemed almost unnatural. Birds and insects existed, of course, but their sounds were faint, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The first evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridges, I saw something that made my stomach twist. I was walking along a narrow trail near the Appalachian Ridge when I caught a glimpse of a figure standing between two trees. He was wearing a ranger's uniform, older style, something that looked decades out of date. He didn't move, and when I stopped, he just stared. I blinked, and he was gone. At first, I convinced myself it was my imagination. Shadows in the forest play tricks on you, but something in the way he looked, it was wrong. His eyes, I'll never forget those eyes. Empty, almost hollow, but somehow fixed on me. The next morning, I asked the park supervisor about him. "Oh, that's probably just one of the old stories," he said with a laugh, brushing it off. Rangers who used to patrol these woods, some say they never left. I smiled politely, but his comment didn't sit right with me. A few days later, something more unsettling happened. I was patrolling near a small creek that twisted through the heart of the forest when my radio crackled. I picked it up, expecting another ranger checking in, but all I heard was a whisper. A man's voice, distorted and low. "Leave, now." I froze. My first thought was a prank, another ranger trying to scare me. But the voice wasn't coming from the radio itself. It was around me, like it was carried through the trees. I turned slowly, scanning the shadows, and I saw him again. The same figure, uniform tattered, standing just beyond the creek's edge. His face was pale, almost gray, and his mouth moved, but no sound came out. I stumbled back and ran. The forest seemed to stretch longer than it should, the trees closing in on me. By the time I reached my ranger station, I was shaking. My supervisor noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked. I opened my mouth to explain, but no words came out. How could I describe something that didn't make sense? That night, I stayed awake, listening to the wind in the trees. Around midnight, I heard it again, the soft crunch of footsteps on the forest floor. Slow, deliberate. They stopped just outside the cabin. I held my breath, heart pounding. Then came a knock. Or maybe a tap on the window. I didn't look. I didn't want to see. I just stayed huddled under my blanket, pretending to sleep. By morning, the marks were gone. No footprints. Nothing. The forest looked innocent again. I tried to tell myself it was stress, isolation, the anxiety of my first real job. But over the next few weeks, the sightings became more frequent. I saw him near campsites, always watching, never moving. Sometimes I would catch him in the distance while driving the patrol roads, standing perfectly still, facing me, before vanishing the moment I slowed down. One afternoon, I was checking on an old fire lookout tower, a structure abandoned for decades. The view was beautiful, but something about it felt wrong. The air was colder than the rest of the forest, unnaturally so, and the shadows seemed to cling to the corners. As I climbed the wooden stairs, I heard whispers, low murmurs like a crowd of people talking in the distance. At the top, I found an old journal, dusty and yellowed. The entries were from a park ranger named Samuel Duval, dated back to the 1930s. The writing was frantic. "The woods, they are not what they seem. Something watches. I cannot leave. It follows the uniform." My blood ran cold. I remembered the figure, the uniform. Reading the journal, the last entry made my stomach drop. "If you find this, know that I am trapped." The forest does not forgive. The eyes never blink. That night, I slept in the patrol cabin with every light on, but sleep didn't come. Around 2 a.m., the radio crackled again. This time, a clear voice. "Ranger, join us." I bolted upright. The temperature in the room plummeted, and I felt a presence at the door. Something heavy leaned against it, pressing in. I couldn't move. My muscles were frozen. Then, from the shadows, I saw him. The figure, closer than ever, his uniform gray and worn, his face a hollow mask of despair. I screamed and ran. I ran until the sun was rising, until the first park rangers were driving through to relieve the night shift. They found me huddled in the parking lot, sobbing, shaking, and muttering about a ghost ranger. After that, I quit. I couldn't handle it. But even now, months later, I can't stop seeing him in my dreams. He walks through forests I've never been in, appearing silently, watching. Sometimes, I wake up and hear a faint tap on my window, like old boots on leaves. I did some research after I left the park. Samuel Duval, the ranger from the journal, had disappeared in 1938. He was never found, and official records say he abandoned his post. But a few older rangers whispered that he was claimed by the woods, a phrase they used when someone vanished without a trace. And I believe them. The forest doesn't just take people, it keeps them. I don't know why he's tied to the uniform, why he watches the new rangers. Maybe he wants company, maybe he wants revenge. But one thing is certain, the woods remember. They never forget. Sometimes, when I think I've escaped, I hear the whisper in my mind, "Ranger, join us." And I remember that hollow stare, the gray uniform, the eyes that never blink. I know that one day, if I ever return to the Shenandoah backwoods, I'll see him again. Waiting, watching, patient. I can't describe what it's like to see something that should be dead, standing silently in the shadows, following you through the trees without a sound. You think the forest is safe, that the ranger stations, the patrol roads, even the sunlight can protect you, but it can't. The forest owns that part of Shenandoah, and Samuel Duval, he still walks it. If you ever work in a remote park, if you ever wear a ranger's uniform, remember this. Don't wander alone, don't trust the quiet, and never, ever ignore the feeling that someone is watching. Because if you do, you might see him, and when you do, you won't be alone. I learned the hard way. Story the end.
Story number 2.
My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 28 years old. I've never been one to scare easily, or at least I thought I wasn't. But what I experienced that summer in 2018 has haunted me every single day since, and I need to tell someone about it. I've tried to bury it, tried to convince myself it was just stress or exhaustion, but deep down, I know it was real, and it was horrifying. I worked that summer as a temporary park ranger assistant at Redwood National Park in Northern California. I was mostly tasked with patrolling trails, maintaining cabins, and doing minor repair work. My supervisor, Ranger Dalton, told me that the park was quiet but alive, and that most of the dangers were just natural. Wild animals, rogue hikers, the occasional storm. Nothing I hadn't imagined in advance. I remember the first week vividly. The park was breathtaking. Towering redwoods that seemed to scrape the sky, fog that hugged the forest floor like a living thing, and a silence that was almost oppressive. I loved it. The solitude felt like a gift. But it was during one of those quiet nights that I first saw him. Or it. I was checking the back trail near the old Miller cabin, a site that had been abandoned for decades. The moon was low, casting long shadows through the trees. I had my flashlight, my radio, and my notebook, ready to log any sightings of wildlife or trail damage. That's when I heard footsteps behind me, slow, deliberate, and crunching over the dry leaves. "Hello?" I called, trying to sound braver than I felt. No answer. I turned. Nothing. But the feeling of being watched settled over me like a blanket of ice. That's when I saw the figure. At first, it was just a shadow. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I saw him clearly. A man in a ranger uniform, hat pulled low, standing perfectly still among the trees. His face was pale, almost translucent, but his eyes, God, his eyes, they were hollow and black, like pits. "Ranger Dalton?" I asked cautiously. That was my supervisor's name, and something about the uniform seemed familiar. The figure tilted his head, slowly, deliberately, like he was assessing me. Then, without a sound, he turned and walked deeper into the forest. I froze, heart hammering. I wanted to follow, but something primal told me to stay put. The figure didn't run, didn't hurry, he just disappeared, swallowed by the fog. When I finally dared to move, there was nothing left. No footprints, no rustling, no sign he'd ever been there. I laughed nervously to myself, telling myself it was a trick of the light, a shadow cast by the moon. But that night, Back in the ranger cabin, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those hollow eyes staring at me, judging. The next morning, I mentioned it to a senior ranger, Paula, a woman in her 50s who had worked at the park for over 20 years. She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "You saw him," she said simply. What?" I stammered. "The park has a visitor," she said quietly, her eyes flicking toward the window as if afraid he might be watching. "They call him the Miller Cabin Ranger. He's been here since the 1930s, maybe longer. Everyone who's worked back there knows the story, but most don't talk about it. He doesn't like strangers." I felt my stomach drop. "He died there," Paula continued, "years ago. Some kind of accident, or maybe a murder. No one really knows. He was never found, but people keep seeing him, patrolling the trails, making sure no one disturbs his forest. Some say he's protective. Others say he's not." That day, I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was a story, folklore meant to scare new employees. But as the days went on, the sightings became harder to ignore. It started subtly. My tools would disappear from the shed and then reappear in the middle of the trail. Footprints, heavy, military-like, showed up where no one had been. The radio would crackle late at night with static, and sometimes I could swear I heard whispers calling my name. Then one night, I had to patrol alone. The fog was thick, the kind that seems alive, curling around your legs and choking your senses. I was near the Miller cabin again when I felt it, the presence. Behind me, cold, heavy, suffocating. I spun around. Nothing. But then I saw him again, stepping out from behind a tree. The pale ranger, uniform dusty and torn, hat shadowing his face. He didn't walk this time. He glided, moving faster than any human could. And then I heard it. A voice. Not loud, not human, but inside my head. "Leave." It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a warning. It was a command. I ran. I ran so fast I didn't notice the uneven ground until I tripped over a root and fell hard on my knee. My flashlight skittered across the dirt, and when I looked up, he was gone. Just like that. No footprints, no sound, nothing. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the cabin, flashlight in hand, waiting, listening. And then I saw shadows moving outside the window, stretching and twisting like fingers. They stopped when I blinked. The next day, I found messages scratched into the wooden floorboards of the cabin. At first, I thought someone had been vandalizing the place, but then I realized I was the only one with access. The words were simple: "You don't belong." I reported it to my supervisor, hoping for some rational explanation. Dalton looked serious, but there was fear in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "Emily," he said quietly, "the forest, it protects its own. Some rangers, they don't leave, ever." I laughed nervously, but I could see he wasn't joking. That evening, I decided to stay away from the back trails entirely. I stuck to the main paths around the visitor center where other staff and hikers were present. It felt safer, less personal. But the park seemed to know. Even there, I would see flashes of movement at the tree line, glimpses of a hat, a uniform, the same hollow eyes, and every time I looked directly at him, he vanished. The worst night came toward the end of my assignment. I was finishing a late patrol near the old ranger station, the forest quieter than I had ever heard it. I remember the air being thick, heavy, like I was breathing water. I thought I was alone, until I heard the footsteps again. Slow, deliberate, behind me. I froze. My flashlight flickered, then went out entirely. I fumbled in the dark, and that's when I felt it. A hand, pale, icy, gripping my shoulder. My heart stopped. I turned, screaming. There he was, right in front of me. Closer than I had ever seen him. His eyes, empty, black voids, pierced into mine. "Leave," he said again. This time, the voice was louder, human but hollow, echoing in my skull. "Leave or stay forever." I stumbled backward, tripping over roots, falling onto the dirt. When I scrambled up and ran, I didn't look back. I didn't stop until I reached my car, parked on the main road outside the park. My legs burned, my lungs were on fire, but I didn't care. I drove straight to the nearest motel and didn't go back. After that summer, I quit. I couldn't stay in the park, couldn't ignore what I'd seen. Every so often, I hear stories from other rangers who've been back there. They talk about the Miller Cabin Ranger like he's a ghost, a legend, a warning. But I know he's real. I saw him, I felt him, and I know he's still there, watching, guarding, waiting. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I see him standing at the edge of the trees, silhouetted by the moonlight, just staring. And I remember the feeling of his hand on my shoulder, cold as death, and the warning in his hollow voice. I don't know why he chose to let me go. I don't know if he ever will. But I know one thing. If you ever find yourself alone in a forest in Northern California and you see a ranger in the shadows, you need to leave. And don't look back. Because some rangers never really retire. Some never really leave. Story the end.
Story number 3.
My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28 years old, and I still remember that night like it was yesterday, though it's been over 5 years. I've never told anyone this story in full before, because, frankly, people think I'm crazy when I do. But I know what I experienced, and it changed me forever. I had just graduated with a degree in environmental science, and I was desperate for a summer job. The kind of job that would get me outdoors, away from the fluorescent office walls I'd been staring at for months. That's when I found the posting for a seasonal park ranger assistant at Pine Hollow National Forest in upstate New York. It was the kind of place you see in postcards. Dense woods, misty mornings, and miles of trails where no one seemed to tread. The pay wasn't great, but I didn't care. I loved the wilderness. The first few weeks were ordinary. I worked under Ranger Tom, a middle-aged man who had been with the Forest Service for over 30 years. He was gruff but fair, and he knew the park like the back of his hand. I spent my days patrolling the trails, checking cabins, and making sure campers were following the rules. At night, we stayed at the ranger station, a small wooden lodge tucked deep into the forest just off the main road. It all started one night around mid-July. I was on the late shift, walking the trail that led to Black Hollow, a notoriously isolated section of the park. Tom had warned me that the area was different, that some people said it was cursed, but he brushed it off as campfire stories. Still, I felt a chill as I trudged through the thick undergrowth, flashlights slicing through the darkness. That's when I first saw him. He was standing near the old ranger cabin, which had been abandoned for decades. At first, I thought it was a prank, a fellow ranger hiding in the shadows, but something was off. He was dressed in a ranger uniform, but it wasn't like any uniform I'd ever seen. It was old-fashioned, from another era, olive green wool, brass buttons, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched me. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He didn't answer. Then, without warning, he started walking toward me. His movements were slow, deliberate, almost gliding over the forest floor. My first instinct was to run, but I didn't. Something about him paralyzed me. His eyes, or what I could see beneath the brim of that hat, were dark, empty, and cold. "Who are you?" I whispered. He stopped just a few feet away, and then he spoke in a voice that sounded like dry leaves scraping across the ground. "You shouldn't be here." I laughed nervously. "I'm a park ranger," I said. "I belong here." But the laugh died in my throat. His face shifted, or maybe it wasn't his face at all. His skin seemed to stretch and warp under the dim light. I blinked, and suddenly he was gone. Just like that, he vanished. My heart was pounding, and I thought maybe I'd imagined it. After all, the forest plays tricks on you at night. Shadows twist, branches scrape like claws. I told myself that was all it was. I finished my patrol and returned to the station. Tom noticed I was pale. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just night eyes, you know?" He nodded, but there was a tension in his jaw that didn't go away. I didn't understand it then, but I would soon. The next week, the sightings became more frequent. I'd be walking a trail, and I'd feel the sensation of being watched. Sometimes I'd see the ranger at the edge of the trees, standing completely still. Other times, I'd catch glimpses of him in the reflection of the pond water or in the windows of abandoned cabins. And each time, he got closer. One evening, I was patrolling near Ranger Hill, where the old watchtower stands. The sun had just set, leaving the forest in that dim twilight that feels heavier than darkness itself. I heard a whistle, a low, mournful sound that echoed through the trees. I froze. It was the kind of whistle that only someone very old would make, cracked and ragged, like a warning. And then he appeared, standing at the base of the tower. This time, I didn't hesitate. I ran. I ran so fast that I stumbled over roots, scraped my arms on branches, and didn't stop until I reached the station. I slammed the door behind me and locked it. "Emily?" Tom's voice was sharp. "What is it?" I tried to explain, but the words sounded ridiculous even as I said them. "A man," I finally whispered. "An old ranger. He's been following me." Tom's face went pale. He looked like he wanted to say something, but didn't. Finally, he exhaled. "You saw him, didn't you?" "I don't know what I saw," I said. He's not normal. He disappears." Tom shook his head slowly. "That ranger, he died here, 70 years ago. Name was Harold Kane. He was the lead ranger at Black Hollow. There was an incident. He killed a camper by accident, tried to protect the park, he said, but the boy died. Kane disappeared into the woods after that, never to be seen alive again." I stared at him. "You're saying he's a ghost?" Tom nodded. "I've seen him a few times. Most rangers do at some point. He doesn't mean harm, most of the time, but he's unstable. The forest keeps him here. He's bound to the land." I wanted to laugh, wanted to tell him it was nonsense, but I couldn't. I had seen him. That night, I stayed in the station, too terrified to patrol, but around midnight, I heard it, scratching at the window. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails on wood. My heart stopped. I grabbed a flashlight and slowly approached. The beam landed on him. Kane, standing there, just outside, his eyes black holes in the night. "Emily," he said. His voice was closer this time, inside my head almost, as if he didn't even need to speak aloud. "You shouldn't be here." I froze. There was no reasoning, no pleading. I backed away, tripped and fell. When I looked up, he was gone. Sleep didn't come that night. And then, over the next few days, the encounters escalated. He began appearing inside the station, always just in the corner of my vision, always gone when I turned fully toward him. Objects moved. Doors that I knew I had locked were open. My radio picked up static, and sometimes I could swear I heard that whistling coming from the forest, calling my name. One night, I decided to confront him. I took my flashlight, a few tools from the station, and headed to Black Hollow. The forest was unnervingly quiet. No crickets, no owls, nothing. Just the sound of my own breathing and footsteps. I reached the old ranger cabin, the one where I first saw him. The door creaked open, though I was sure I had locked it. Inside, the air was freezing. My flashlight flickered, and then he was there. Not a shadow this time. Full form. Harold Kane. His face, oh God, his face. The eyes were empty, and the mouth stretched in a silent scream, like he had been in agony for decades. "You shouldn't be here," he repeated, but this time it wasn't a warning. It was anger. Pure, concentrated anger. I tried to speak, tried to reason, but my voice caught in my throat. He stepped closer, and the temperature dropped so fast that I could see my own breath. Then I saw it. Behind him, shadows twisting into forms, other figures, campers from years past, eyes wide with terror, mouths open in screams that never came. I ran. I didn't look back. The forest seemed endless, a maze designed to trap me. Branches scratched my face, roots tripped me, but I didn't stop. I could hear him behind me, the whistling growing louder, angrier. I don't know how I made it out. I don't know how I reached the station. When I finally slammed the door behind me, I didn't leave the building again for hours. Tom found me in the morning, pale and trembling. "You've seen him," he said quietly, "and now he knows you." I quit that job the next day. I packed my things, drove away, and never looked back. But the thing about Harold Kane is that he's not bound by time in the way we are. I've seen shadows out of the corner of my eye while hiking in other forests. I've heard the whistling when I'm alone at night. I've felt the same cold stare on me during late-night walks. I know he's still out there, watching, waiting. And I know that somewhere, deep in Pine Hollow National Forest, he still walks the trails he once patrolled. People ask why I don't go camping anymore, why I don't take jobs in the forest. I tell them I'm busy, that I prefer the city. But the truth is, I'm terrified. Terrified that if I ever go back, Harold Kane will be there. And this time, he won't just disappear. Sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I hear the whistling again. It's never loud, just enough to remind me. He remembers me, and I remember him. Story the end.